Hey, I'm Misfit Heathens Desert Crew MF, and I'm chatting with Staxx.
Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Misfit.
Hey, how you doing, Staxx?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing fair today, for a Saturday anyways.
Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time.
No, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no doubt. So where were you born and raised?
Yeah, I was born and raised right here in Tucson, man. Been here my whole life, 54 years worth of it anyways. Actually, I did go to Texas for a year after I got into an accident. Ended up losing my house, lost everything, lost my job and shit. I was actually run over on my bicycle by a U-Haul truck, man. Put me in a coma for about a week, broke some ribs, broke my scapula, punctured my lung, mad road rash over my whole body. So I went there for about a year to recover at my parents' crib. Then I came back to Tucson, and I've been here my whole life though, man. Just beautiful place to be.
What was your early life like?
It wasn't bad, man. My parents were hippies, so it was did a lot of moving around, a lot of going from town to town, city to city. It wasn't bad. That's it's just seeing the lifestyle of different people from different states and how they lived was the biggest trip to me. You know what I mean? They were different every state we went to, but it was all the same style, hippie ass communities that I grew up in. It wasn't too bad, but it didn't really go to many schools for too long, maybe a year, and then I'd bounce out to another state and go to a different school. So didn't really make a lot of friends. So I was kind of like, didn't really want to have friends when I moved state to state. I didn't make friends with people because I was like, well, I ain't going to be here long. So there's no reason to get, to know you. But it wasn't bad, man.
Yeah, you just start to get to know someone. Boom, let's go.
Yeah, for real, man. That's how that hippie stuff works, I guess, man. I don't know. I really wasn't into it. Like I said, being a kid, I was just, smooth traveling state to state. I thought that was kind of cool, but yeah, I never really made much friends in any states.
So when you start getting a little older into your like teenage years, what transpires then? Are you into motorcycles too?
Yeah, actually, my mom, when I was a teenager, we actually moved back to Arizona. And we actually found home base here. And I actually started going to elementary schools and solid junior highs and high schools here in Arizona. All the traveling was done when I was younger. So when I was actually physically able to start really going to school, like 4th and 5th grade, we found home base here in Arizona. And yeah, I got into riding motorcycles, dirt bikes. We lived out in the middle of BFE. So it was like, my mom's still on her hippie ways a little bit. So they just got me a motorcycle and they said, hey, go do your thing. And I was just riding through the desert. I actually made a lot of friends riding dirt bikes. So yeah, I've been a bike rider my whole life, pretty much, mostly dirt bikes. So high school, some of my friends, when the crotch rockets came out, and those are like the big things, I actually hopped on a couple of those a couple times, but for street bike wise, not too much, man. Like I said, I did ride a couple crotch rockets here and there, but really wasn't my gig. I was more into the dirt bike thing, ripping it up out in the desert, hitting jumps, doing stuff like that, riding with my buddies.
Yeah, it's fun.
Man, it was great. Back then you didn't have to have any kind of HOV plate on your dirt bike. It was meant for the desert, and the cops didn't mess with you too much. So it was pretty cool. You could go ripping by cops and they just look at you like, yeah, you're a dumbass.
Yeah, they're not going to really chase you or anything, especially back then. They really didn't care, right?
No, not at all, man. Especially where I grew up. Like I said, I grew up in Marana. It was basically a little farming town. They specialized in cotton, and what they did, they just grew cotton fields, and it was a bunch of podunk nobodies out there. And man, it just you just get on your bike and you could rip it up as long as you didn't tear up their fields. They were cool.
Well, so what was your first knowledge about motorcycle clubs? Were there some in your area back then?
Yeah, actually there was, man. There was a couple clubs out where we lived at. They're actually well-known clubs now. I mean, if you say the names, you'd be like, oh yeah, you know who they are. But they're prominent clubs that are still around. At that point, some of them, they had kids, and I would hang out with some of their kids. You know what I mean? But it was always like a big secret thing, like, hey man, sorry you can't come to my house. We got this, we got that, and didn't really understand why. But it was I guess kind of like the bike scene back then. You know what I mean? Is more private, and they didn't want strangers coming around, especially kids. You know what I mean? Even though they had kids, so it was like I was pretty diverse in some of the clubs that were out there. As a kid, there was this little bar called the Wagon Wheel that we used to hang out on. And all of us kids would sit out front on the wall while their parents, the bike scene people, were inside the bar. And we thought we were just cool stuff back then, hanging out on the wall, chopping it up, trying to hide cigarettes, passing them back and forth so no one get caught, while their parents and stuff were inside the bar getting all tore back. But yeah, I knew quite a few clubs that were out where I lived at, and like I said, they are pretty prominent clubs that are still around, and they're heavy hitters.
When you're a young kid, you're intrigued by that type of stuff.
Oh,
right?
very much so, man. Yeah, I mean, even seeing their bikes. I mean, back in the late 70s, early 80s, man, so they'd roll in on these choppers, man, and they're just loud and just rah, all up in your face, and guys rolling in, long hair, tattoos, just looking angry and mean to take on the whole world. And as a kid, you're like, wow, you're, a little scared, but you're intrigued by like, whoa, man, that looks like something that would be super cool, super fun to be hanging out. And, as a kid, you might want to say something, but you're like, no, man, that guy looks a little too much. I don't know. I like my life the way it is.
Yeah. my father used to hang out with people like that, all burly, and always around the biker type.
Yeah.
So when you're a teenager, you're going to school? Do you know what you want to do with your future?
Yeah, actually, man, I was me and one of my best friends, we had signed up for the delayed entry to go into the Marines. And needless to say, that didn't happen. My senior year, I ended up catching some felony charges and ended up going to prison. So that kind of shot me right in the foot. I wasn't able to go into the military like I wanted to. So I had family that was in the military, and I kind of went to follow their steps. I got a visit from the recruiter at the jail. I thought, hey, he's coming to get me out. And he had me sign a paper and say, sorry, man, we're not going to be able to use your services. Best of luck. And then, yeah, I ended up taking my case to trial. They gave me 10 years. I did 7 of it. Yeah, I did some stupid.
You don't mind walking me through what you did?
Well, let's just say kidnapping, armed robbery, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon.
And you're young.
I was 18.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
And I actually hit a prison yard. I took my stuff to trial. They were going to give me 15. I took it to trial. What they gave me was 10. I hit a yard up in Florence at 19 years old. That was a big culture shock, from being out on the streets, being locked up with, dudes that are in prison, and, the sorts that are in there, man. You had everything from just drug runners, murderers. You had all kinds of, and here I was, some dumb kid who pulled some shenanigans and got caught up in a bad way.
So how do you navigate through that life being a young kid?
It was tough. My family, I wouldn't say they turned their back on me, but they kind of said, hey, this is a learning lesson. You're going to do this by yourself. You need to realize that everything you do has a consequence. I didn't realize that at first. As a kid, basically, like I said, a kid, 19 years old, and here I am locked up with, grown ass men. And I didn't really get the concept of that. But, after first year, almost 2 years, I understood what Mom was saying. Everything does have a consequence, and it, bit me in the. I'm kind of glad that I didn't go into the military the way things went, because if not, I wouldn't be here where I'm at right now.
Yeah. So it all works out, right? Eventually.
It does, man. It does. Truly does.
Were your family sending money to you and supporting you that way when you were in prison?
You know, the only one that actually did was my grandma. You know, she was like super religious. She was sending me money. She was sending me, you know, stuff through the mail. My parents, nah, like I said, they didn't have a lot of money to send me as it was, and they were trying to teach me a lesson, you know, learning lesson. So I had to come up with my own hustle when I was in prison, you know, and first it started out with drawing on envelopes and then writing poems for dudes, and then I got into tattooing, and you know, that was really my hustle probably for the last 4 years in prison was tattooing, getting my hustle on that way.
Damn, that's a rough way to grow up. I started going to prison at a young age. I was 13 years old. Caught a home invasion. I know what it's like, man. I've been there.
See, I was cool as a juvenile. I didn't, you know, when I was younger, man, I no issues, man. I was on the straight and narrow. Just one night hanging out with some buddies, we decided to do some dumb shit, and I got caught up, and you know what I mean? It kind of bit me in the backside.
Wow. So is there any crazy situations that you've seen in there you can walk me through?
Oh man, I saw several. Actually, I was out at a yard on Wilmont, and this is when they took away all the free weights. We got released out onto the weight pile bench. And this is back when guys actually had free weights and you could lift free weights. Well, I guess there was a beef between the whites and the Mexican side. And one of the Mexican guys was on the weight bench. He was benching some weights. One of the white guys came up and clocked him in the head with a 5-pound plate, and he dropped the bar basically on his chest and throat, and exploded his throat and face. So yeah, it was. I've seen some people get up in there in the chow hall. Not like I was really close to it. I was sitting down, you know, fights break out, and next thing you know, you see blood because people are getting jacked up. But seen a couple things in there.
Did you get involved? Did they ever come at you with anything?
No, well, you know, you always get tested when you go in, you know what I mean? A young kid, they want to see what you're about, you know, if you're going to stand up, if you're just going to punk down. My first 4 days in prison, I had dudes run into my cell. Two guys run into my cell. There's a guy on the outside the door. Two run into my cell. One closed the door, and me and one guy would just start throwing hands. And this happened for 4 days. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, is this going to be what it's going to be like every single day in here? Well, on the 5th day, same happened, man. They come running in my door, close the door. I jump up, kick my slippers off. I'm ready to scrap. I'm like, I'm done with this. I'm either going to die or we're going to get this done right now. And the dude told me, he's like, hey, man, calm down, sit down. I want to talk to you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You want to talk to me? You've been coming here kicking my ass past 4 days. What's going on? And he's like, man, we just had to come and test you, see what you're about. You know, you held your own. You didn't say nothing, you know, and here I am. I got lumped up forehead, black eye, fat lip. You know what I mean? You know, 19-year-old kid not knowing what the hell's going on, just getting my ass kicked every day. Yeah, like I said, the first 4 days was rough. 5th day, I broke bread with them. They asked me to sit at their table at break when we went to breakfast and lunch. I talked to some of the upper guys, and you know, who were running the yards, and you know, I made my way that way. You know, it was quite an adventure, I'd have to say.
It's pretty wild. It is a whole new experience from being.
Man, it's a whole different world in there, man. It's a whole different world in there, brother. You know, I mean, because there's a lot of guards that actually turn the blind eye too. They know what's going on, but they just like, yep, nope. They know what's happening. So
and you're pissed, right? You're pissed. Like, these dudes are lumping me up. I'm ready to stab them all, right?
Yeah, for real, man. And then I got nothing to stab with, you know what I mean? Here I am, new to the yard. I'll pull up my shoelace. What am I going to do? You know, whack you with my slipper. I didn't have anything, you know, but you know, these guys are all seasoned. I'd say seasoned pros at what they were doing. You know what I mean? So they're big too. Big dudes. Oh yeah, ain't no small dudes in there. Like I said, when I went in, they still had free weights, and these guys, man, they got nothing better to do with their time than go out to the yard and get jacked. You know what I mean? So, but like I said, the first 4 days I was in, man, I thought that's what my whole time was going to be like, was throwing hands every single day.
And then it kind of smooths out there.
Yeah, it smoothed out. I got in with some guys, you know, got hooked up with a couple clicks in there. You know, there's different sides you walk, different lines you walk. You know what to do and what not to do.
So when you finally get released, what's that like, and where do you want to take your life when you get out?